Welcome everybody. We are here today to talk about bell schedules. Um, we're going to do a quick overview of what today is going to look like. So the first hour, it is a power hour, so we are going to try to keep the informational sessions or the informational time to 1 hour today, probably a little bit less. And then at the end of the presentation, we do want to give folks the opportunity to join a breakout room if you're interested. So we know that with bell schedules, this can be very different from school to school and district to district. So we are going to offer short breakout rooms at the end of the session today to go more in depth with you if you have questions regarding your specific bell schedule. And I guess I'll step back. I didn't introduce myself. My name is Meredith Reagan, but I will be one of the Meta team members presenting today. Margie Lee is also here with us, and she will be presenting as well. And we have various team members in the chat who will be helping out. So if you have questions in the chat, please reach out and we will answer those as we go along. If those will be best probably for general questions. If you have a more specific question, that might be better for the breakout room at the end, but also, or you can put in a case with us as always, but feel free to throw questions in the chat too. So let's see, get to my next screen. Okay, so just kind of want to orient everyone to the purpose of today's training. So we did heavily advertise this as wanting a variety of people from districts to be involved in today's training because we feel like this is a topic that really deserves sort of its own dedicated power hour. So bell schedules on their face can seem seemingly simple, but they can have a significant impact on both core PowerSchool as well as EMIS reporting as well. So that's why we found that it was certainly helpful to have a dedicated time to talk about that today, just because obviously Ohio, as we know, Ohio calculates attendance in hours, and we know that the bell schedule operates in hours as well. And so any small inaccuracies in a bell schedule can result in some issues with reporting. So we want to the hope today is to prepare you for looking to next year, evaluating what's working well, what's not working well this year, and start thinking about any changes that you want to make going forward. Okay, so then just some a high-level overview of what we're going to be talking about today. We are going to just go over some bell schedule basics. So that's just going to be, what is a bell schedule? Why is it important? We realize that we have a lot of different users on the call. So some folks that might have years and years of experience working with bell schedules, while others may not have all of the experience with bell schedules. So we just kind of want to orient everyone to, where we're starting today. So we're also going to talk about attendance considerations as it relates to Ohio law and the bell schedules, as well as some bell schedule best practices to really give you some practical steps and information to kind of get started and taking today's training, applying it to your own bell schedule as you move forward into next year. And finally, we're going to look at some next steps. What are some things that you can do now in order to set yourself up for success for next year? Okay, so just a word of caution before we really dive in and get started. Um, we just want to say, and kind of just as a default statement, best practices do not make any changes to or to delete any bell schedules that you have used this school year. So if a bell schedule has been used on your calendar for the 25-26 school year, and attendance has been associated with that bell schedule, then you want to not make changes to or delete those. This will cause issues with attendance calculations. If you feel like your bell schedule, if after today's meeting you feel like your bell schedule absolutely needs attention now, and it would be ideal for that to be changed before the end of the school year, then I would definitely recommend putting in a ticket to us. You, or if you are a district leader, of course, you can put in a ticket. If you are not a district leader in your district, reach out to your district leader and they can either help you or put in a case with us, and we can help the team decide what the best course of action is for building those bell schedules and any adjustments that need to be made if needed. Okay, so I just wanted to quickly, like I said, kind of get everyone on the same page with some bell schedule basics before we jump into attendance considerations, best practices, and things like that. So, um, just starting off very basic, what is a bell schedule? So, a bell schedule specifies the start time and duration of one or more instructional periods on each day of a day pattern. So, essentially, as we most probably know, it's telling you what time students are in each identified period of the day. So one and only one bell schedule is assigned to each school day on the building's calendar in PowerSchool. Most buildings have more than one bell schedule, and again, this is going to look different from building to building, from district to district. Some buildings might be, for example, operating on sort of a rotating day pattern. So perhaps their students go to different classes on different days of the week. That school, for example, might have a few different bell schedules that they use regularly, so their calendar shows that accordingly. While other schools might just have, maybe their students go to school or go to the same classes each day of the week. And so they have a regular or typical bell schedule that is used on most days on the calendar. Um, Most of the time, these schools, as you know, still have additional bell schedules to account for days that might look a little bit different. So, for example, I think the first thing that comes to my mind is a late arrival or an early release, adjusted period times for those days, or maybe you have an assembly day schedule, really anything where your times where students are in certain periods or certain classes changes on a particular day for a certain reason. So that is sort of just on a very high level what a bell schedule is. We're going to talk more about these pieces here in detail. So that is what a bell schedule is. As far as where a bell schedule is, I'm sure if you have worked with bell schedules in the past, you are familiar with this. But to get to bell schedules, you can view those and edit those at the building level. So to navigate there, I did include the pathway just in case that is your way of navigating to things in PowerSchool. Of course, you can always search in the top, but you can find that under school management, scheduling, and bell schedules is where your bell schedule lives for each of your buildings. And again, that is where you can view your current year bell schedules, and you can also create new bell schedules for the year or edit bell schedules that currently exist. Once you get to the bell schedule page, this is again where I'm working today out of Meta train environment, and so our example school today that we're using is Meta Middle School, and so these are our current bell schedules that we have at Meta Middle School. As you can see in my example, I actually have a bell schedule that I'm sort of designating for next school year. Just wanted to show that. As an addition, maybe I don't like something about the current regular day schedule, so I've created a new one and I'm kind of thinking through about what that will look like for next school year. So again, this can be um, found by clicking into, or once you click into the name of the bell schedule, so there on the left, you can edit the name and the attendance conversion method associated with each bell schedule. And then if you actually want to make changes to the periods, the times, that is going to allow you to make those changes there on the edit schedule, which we're going to look at here on the next screen. Okay, so this is just, again, our example from Meta Middle School. I just want to preface this by saying, this is not what every school's bell schedule is going to look like. Each school is different. It could look similar or it could look drastically different from this. But at Meta Middle School, this is our current bell schedule. As you can see in each column, it lists the period, the start and end time of the period, the duration, if it counts for attendance, if it is used as the daily attendance period. So one period during each day would be considered your daily attendance period, and that is used. Sometimes we'll refer to that as the bridge period, which we're going to talk more about at length later here in the presentation. So each of these lines, sometimes we might call them periods, but PowerSchool calls them bell schedule items. And so really what a bell schedule item means, it's just each line and it's the period and its associated times and information. So as you are building your bell schedule, you will be clicking in that top right hand corner where it says new, and you will be entering in the information seen here. So same information that's there in the columns. It's pretty straightforward. That period comes from your periods table. So that is where you will be able to, if you see an adjustment that you need to make from your periods available to you, that will be on your periods table, which we'll talk about more here in a little bit. It will ask you for your start and end time. And then again, this is our bridge period or our daily attendance period. And so it has the default time in and time out as well. So that will only be a required field for your daily attendance period, which will be one of your periods during the day. And that is the period that you will, we have said, yes, we want to use it for daily or for our daily attendance. And that is shown up there at the top too, with our default time in, start of the day, and time out, end of the day. Then just taking a step back, so we're actually just wanted to show you how, and if you are someone who manages the calendar for your school or for your district, you will know this, but you might not all have access to this, and that's okay, but I'm looking under school management, scheduling, and configure calendar. One part of this is how the bell schedule gets assigned to each day of school. So in this example, for simplicity's sake, I showed that most school days are our regular day bell schedule, where you can see on Friday, August 22nd is our 2-hour delay schedule. So the bell schedules that we were just looking at on our previous pages when we were looking at our current school year bell schedules are what we're able to apply on the district or on the school calendar. This can be found under school management, scheduling, configure calendar, and just wanted to kind of show how those two pieces speak to each other. That is all I have. I am going to turn it over to Margie to go over to talk more about some important attendance pieces, but any questions before I do that? Okay. And then Margie, I will go ahead and turn it over to you.
All right. Good morning, everyone. I have some news, of course, about the Ohio attendance and bell schedule. So let's just get right into it. As we all know, Ohio attendance law is still based on instructional hours, with the HB 96 differentiates between chronic absenteeism and habitual truancy. You can see those two slides on the right that pretty much give you all the information you need on that. But because attendance and reporting are based on instructional hours, having the bell schedule set up correctly is extremely important. If the bell schedule isn't accurate, attendance calculations can be thrown off, which can then affect how students are reported to the state. So this is a very, very important thing to know and understand. I know it's a big deal with the attendance this year, and that's why we're trying to reiterate it now. So then I'm going to go into our bell schedule best practices. So here we go. On this one, the 5-minute rule. I really need you to go into each one of your bell schedules and pay attention to this because I do believe that there are some districts out there that need this corrected for next year. Periods must contain at least 5 minutes to be shown in the bell schedule view or on the edit meeting attendance page. That is just crucial. If you have a separate period for daily attendance, that period must be at least 5 minutes, just like it says. We've noticed that some of the bell schedules include periods that are less than 5 minutes long. When that happens, attendance often doesn't get enough time to calculate properly. So if you see this in your bell schedule, there's a good chance your attendance isn't being recorded the way it's supposed to be. So I just want to bring that to your attention on this page, especially 5 minutes. If you have just an attendance time, you need at least 5 minutes. Okay, so we'll go on to the next slide. This one is no gaps between periods. There should be no gaps. I say that again. To make sure the Find Me alert works the way it should, it's important that there aren't any gaps between the end of one period and the start of the next. If you're not familiar with the Find Me alert, you see the arrow there. It shows it on every student's page. And you can click on that if you're trying to locate a student and it happens to be between periods. If there are any gaps between your periods, it's going to come up blank, so you're not going to know where that kid is. Keeping periods back to back will help ensure the system always has location when you need it on a student. This next one I'm going to talk about, let me explain the difference between an internal periods and the bell schedule. Internal periods are basically the behind the scenes framework in PowerSchool. They let the system know which classes are happening at the same time and which ones would conflict with each other. They don't include any times. Those aren't needed here, since internal periods are mainly used to help build and organize the schedule. Okay? The bell schedule periods are the actual clock times. They tell PowerSchool when each period starts and ends, like from 8 to 8:50. These are what the students and the teachers see on their schedules. So the easy way to remember it is internal periods decide what conflicts. Bell periods decide what time it meets. You can change the bell schedules for the delays, for special days, for all the other things that you have in your calendars. You can change the bell schedule without changing the actual class schedule because the internal periods always stay the same. So looking at this, you can see on here where the periods, you can see the breadcrumbs the school management scheduling periods. That's how you can get there. And when you build your schedule, you will have this drop down in your periods so that you know what period each thing is. Again, that's important to understand the difference from the internal periods and the bell schedule. Our next part that we're going into is on the internal periods, external name and abbreviation. When possible, we recommend that internal period 1 lines up with first period on the bell schedule. We know schedulers don't always use internal periods the same way, especially during Power Scheduler build. Sometimes they have 15 to 25 internal periods in play, and then things get cleaned up and finalized by the Power Scheduling team before the school year starts. So that's totally understandable. What staff and students see is still completely up to you. You can set the external name, as you see here, and the abbreviation to whatever makes the most sense for your schedule. The internal period number is something PowerSchool team uses when we're helping troubleshoot issues in DDE, DDA. That's why we suggest, when possible, keeping the internal period 1 as your first bell schedule period. It'll help us when we're supporting you, and most easily it helps us behind the scenes.
And I just wanted to add on to what you said, Margie, too.
Mhm.
The reason we, I think, too, wanted to talk about those internal periods was just I don't think everyone who works with bell schedules might not have an understanding of the numbering system.
Mhm.
And so, as you can see in this example, our ATT period is that internal period number 1 there on the left. So when we go back, we can see that period in the bell schedule is using the abbreviation rather than the internal number here. So this ATT, when you look at the bell schedule, is actually internal period 1. And so that's what we would recommend, is that internal period 1, in this case, the ATT period, is that first period listed in your bell schedule. No, it's not, depending on the school setup. There may be instances where that is just not feasible or just doesn't work for that certain day or day pattern. But when possible, if you're starting and creating a new bell schedule, that really helps us on our end for troubleshooting purposes when that internal period 1 is the first period on the bell schedule.
Yes, most definitely. Thank you. And that is all I have.
Okay. So we are still talking about best practices. So we're going to talk a little bit about the bridge and daily the bridge period, aka the daily attendance period, which is really important to make sure is accurate in your bell schedule so that your daily attendance calculations are correct. So we mentioned before that each bell schedule is going to have one period that they identify as their daily attendance or bridge period. And so there are a couple different ways in which schools decide to do this. And I wanted to highlight both of those examples here. And both are acceptable ways of doing it. It just depends on what is going to make the most sense with your school day. So in this first example, that one there at the top, which is coming from the bell schedule that we have been looking at up until this point, you can see that they have a separate ATT period. So that is what they are using for their daily attendance or bridge period. So they have a 5-minute period, which, as you remember, Margie highlighted the importance of having each period be at least 5 minutes. And so that is just as important, maybe even more important, and especially essential that if you have a separate bridge period, it must be at least 5 minutes. I know we've run into examples where schools are using a shorter amount of time, maybe 1 minute for their bridge period. But in order to ensure that the system is doing its job and calculating daily attendance correctly, it's really important that if you have a separate bridge period, it is at least 5 minutes long. It can be longer, but that is the minimum requirement for all periods, including bridge periods in your bell schedule. The second example down below, you can see that they don't have a separate attendance period called out. So this is, let's say students start at 7:30 in their regular first period class. It's 55 minutes, so it's just a typical first period that actually has a class associated with it. That is still can be considered a bridge period. It just is applied to the first period of the day rather than having a separate period called out for it. That will work too, as long as, like I said, it's more than 5 minutes, which in this case, it makes sense because it's a full length of class. And then on both examples, you can see because they are the daily attendance period for the day, when you enter that bell schedule item into your bell schedule, you're going to put your default time in and your default time out. So that is the start and the end of your school day. So it's also important that to double check to make sure your bridge period, so in the first example, that ATT period, falls within the default time in and time out. So your day starts at 7:35. The ATT period starts at 7:35, ends at 7:40, and that falls within that 7:35 to 2:30 time frame. Same thing as the second example. It starts at 7:30. The first period does, which is also the bridge period, and it is contained within that 7:30 to 2:30 time frame. So that was the main. Really, just wanted to show you two different ways of identifying bridge periods, making sure they're at least 5 minutes, and making sure that the bridge period times fall within that default time in and default time out.
And
Seems
Meredith, I'm
simple, but yep, go ahead. Yep,
just if I can add in real quick. So we actually
absolutely.
just had an instant yesterday where the school said they had filled in their meeting attendance, but none of their daily time came over. So meeting attendance bridges over and it bridges to your daily for any of the students. And it was an easy one to look up because you could see that in this special bell schedule that they had. So it was like a calamity day bell schedule. They did not have a daily attendance period, a bridge period marked in that bell schedule, and they haven't used it yet for the year. So it's very important that your main bell schedule has your daily attendance, but also double check all of those special calamity days, 2 hour early releases. They all have to have that daily attendance bridge period. Otherwise, your meeting attendance won't come over to your daily.
Thank you. Okay. So more on daily attendance periods. Similarly to the last slide, the entire range of the default time in to default time out should be accounted for by periods in the bell schedule. So in this example, you can see there the default time in is 7:35 to 2:30 p.m. Their start time is 7:35, so that matches up with the start time, or the start time of their first period matches up with the start time of their default time in, and the end time of their last period of the school day lines up with the default time out. So again, this is where it's gonna could look very different, especially depending on what level, if you're at an elementary school versus a secondary school. Obviously at a traditional middle school or high school, you might be calling out these periods separately, and you would want to make sure that each time in the day is accounted for across the entire time span of the day with periods. At an elementary school level, that might look different. You might have fewer periods depending on what you do or do not call out during the day. But the same rule still applies, is that the entire time the entire range of time in that default time in to default time out should be accounted for by a number of periods, whatever that might be in your bell schedule. More on bridge periods. So the bridge period should never have more than one course associated with it, and it shouldn't overlap in time with other bell schedule periods. So because, as Lindsay said, the what the bridge period does, it bridges your meeting attendance to the daily attendance in order to make that calculation. And so if students are in multiple sections or in multiple courses during the same bridge period, that can really cause wonky things to happen for attendance calculations. So in order to avoid any issues with that and to make your data as clean as possible, you want to make sure, again, that the bridge period is if you have a class within that bridge period, whether it's its own separate attendance period, or if you have, your first period of the day identified as your bridge period, make sure that students are only in one course scheduled during that period, and that period's time do not overlap with any other periods in the bell schedule. Anything else from the team on that one? I know this is very, very important.
No, I think yeah, just as long as people understand we had an incident where a school had 6 courses that encompassed the actual bridge period. So that student's attendance, it cannot calculate correctly because the system doesn't understand if your bridge period has 6 courses, where am I to associate that attendance? So it will guess, and it usually isn't the guess that you want. So just as Meredith said, these are huge key rules. Don't ever have more than one course associated in your bridge period. And your bridge period, it can't overlap any other period times because again, calculations for attendance, they will not come through correctly. The system won't be able to differentiate when is your bridge period if it's overlapping, say, with period 2.
Yeah, that's a big one. Okay. So a note about lunches, because as we know in Ohio, lunches are an important part of calculating and making sure that your instructional hours reported and calculated are correct. So, as a best practice, lunches should have the same duration on each bell schedule. So, if you have 8 different bell schedules, and let's say on your typical regular day bell schedule, or the ones that you use on mostly on a day-to-day basis, if your lunch is scheduled for 30 minutes, then it needs to be 30 minutes on every bell schedule, or it should be 30 minutes on every bell schedule. Um, so this is again just important so that it aligns with what is reported to the state. But again, this is a best practice to keep lunches consistent. I know a lot of schools, that is their default anyways, lunches remain consistent, and that is what we would suggest as a best practice for bell schedule setup. I wanted to make a note. I know, like I said, we have different users here on the call. We have a lot of EMIS coordinators, but I know some folks may not be directly working with EMIS, but did want to make a note about the bell schedule and the DL, which if you are an EMIS coordinator, you will know about, and if not, I think it's still worth learning. So as we know, instructional hours are what is used to report for attendance. So it is important that instructional hours reported in the DL should be equal to the default time in and the default time out minus lunch. So that range of time minus lunch should be equal to what is reported in the DL. So if you have a 6.5 hour day and every student has a 30-minute lunch, then 6 instructional hours would need to be reported. And it's just important that what is reported in the DL lines up with what is showing in the Bell schedule. So if you are not sometimes the EMIS coordinator is the person who manages Bell schedules, but not always. So if you are not the person who handles EMIS at your school or at your district, I would just encourage you to reach out to that person at your district and work collaboratively with them if you are making changes to your Bell schedule, just to make sure things are lining up on both the core side on the Bell schedule and on the DL. Would just encourage that. Oh, I know there's a question in the chat. What of high school students starting at different periods? What is the best method for getting the bridge period marked correctly?
As we continue and we keep getting deeper and deeper into the CCPs and the JVS students, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, anyone on the team, I think our recommendation would be is that you need to take on a couple considerations. If you do the robocalls, what time those are going to go in, you're going to have to honestly just really pay attention to when the majority of the students are there. And then as a district and as a building, you'll have to come up with a policy of how you are going to handle the students that come in late. Are they always going to be coming to the office to check in? There's so many different scenarios, especially with the auto, like the scan-ins, the third-party vendors that you kids can use. So I think the best answer, honestly, would be let us know what your scenario is, submit a ticket, and we can try to help work with you on how to best resolve that for you. It's not going to be able to encompass everyone if those students are not going to be attending during your bridge schedule.
And I'm just gonna chime in an idea, and but I'd love some feedback as well. So I know that the primary issue here that I think we're talking about at this moment is that you have students who don't have a first period class. So they come in second or third or fourth because you allow them late arrival if maybe they're an older student, or as Lindsay pointed out, CCP, JVS kids who aren't there in the morning to start their day. And if we're saying the daily attendance is calculated based upon their first period class, and said kids do not have a first period class, how do you handle that? So I would agree, I'd echo what Meredith and Lindsay mentioned, where some buildings will track those kids by having them sign in, and then if but the question is, what if they don't show up? Who is keeping track of the kids who don't show up? They're absent for the day, so it does get complicated. An idea that I had that I'm just going to throw out, and I don't know if this works or not, but a lot of you are using, and I think we're talking to high school right now for the most part. High school is typically where this would take place. So I think a lot of our high schools do have a late arrival holding class that's in first period. And that's the way they have a roster of those kids. Now, there's no teacher that's responsible for those kids. And so, again, that's where it gets complicated. But at least having a roster of those kids who are not tracked in the other way, I think could be useful in this process. And so I just want to throw that out there. I don't know if all the high schools are doing that, but I know many of them are.
Thanks, Lindsay and Stephen.
Andy, I guess I'm not exactly sure in the chat, what about kids who have a schedule made up entirely of CCP classes? Are they getting credit? How can I say that better?
So
For
I
their
think
FS, do they have a percentage?
Yeah, are they ever in your building then? Or are we talking about out of building CCP? I guess the question. What do you have to track their daily attendance then if they're not in the building?
So, especially in our senior class, we have students who their only class in our building is our senior communications class, which meets once a week. So other than that, they are entirely CCP students going to college classes on campus, either at Ohio State or Columbus State. So we see some of those students only once a week. So I'm just, right now we obviously are taking attendance for that, but that means the majority of our students' time, for those kids, we don't have anything marked for them. So I don't know if there's suggestions or guidance or other things that we should be doing for those students.
Would a in it so if that senior teacher, just an idea here, if that senior teacher takes meeting attendance in that period and say marks 5 of them absent, the attendance secretary is able to track that, see that, and would that attendance secretary then mark them absent for the day manually? Is that that's an idea
Yeah,
because they're
I
only
think
expected to
that's
be
what
there
they're doing.
one.
I think that's what
Okay.
they're doing now. I didn't know if there was other suggestions, so I just wanted to throw
Mhm.
that out there because I didn't know if that affected anybody else. I know, we might be a little bit of a different situation in that regard, but I know that CCP is obviously becoming more and more popular, so there are more and more students taking advantage of it. So I just thought it might be useful for the group.
Mhm. Great.
Isn't the way the law's written just like we have kids going to the ESC or to external places? We're supposed to be reporting the attendance for those situations. And CCP is included in that, even though the legislators know it's a joke that colleges don't take attendance. So there's no way for us to report a total for that other than to say they were present every day. So
Uh,
it's funny the way the law is written and then what they're expecting us to report. And sometimes you can get that. Like I said, we have uh, an ESC program that's called Macacheek and run at Madison Champaign. And they send us monthly attendance. We're also supposed to be expected to get attendance from News Story for kids that go to an autism scholarship program. And, you know, when do you get that? Do you get that every month, every year? At the end of the year, it's crazy what they expect us to do, especially with the new, you know, absenteeism that we're supposed to truly be in full effect come August 1st. So, um, like I said, direction and consistency from the state would be nice.
Yes, we
I,
agree, Rich. We would love
yeah.
that. Susan, do you want to hop
Yeah,
in there and give us
yeah,
any extra guidance for PSSR side?
yeah. I was going to jump in. We have posed this up to the state. And as Rich said, ODU came back with, oh, the colleges should be communicating with the schools and telling them when kids are absent and when they're not in these CCP courses. Um, we all know that doesn't happen. So all you can do is the best you can do. If you don't get that info from the colleges, you can't input it. So as Rich said, um, it used to be they said CCP courses, you just assume present. Um, so if you're not getting detail from the colleges, you can't put in the absences. So that's kind of where we're at with that. Does that help at all, Andy?
Yes. So I mean that's essentially what we've been doing is just, we don't get attendance from the colleges, so we just leave it
Correct.
blank. We don't input anything, which, is a default present, I believe. So that's what we've been doing.
The state said, oh, well, the colleges should communicate back to and we just know that just doesn't happen.
No, the only time we ever hear about attendance issues is when we get grades back at the end of the semester and we have students who have failing grades for non-attendance, and
Exactly.
that's it.
Mm-hmm.
So nothing but
Andy, one thing with that is what you said was you've got them scheduled in nothing but CCP, which means do you have anything attached to an attendance period, a bridge period? Because if you don't, then there's actually not a present being counted.
So we do have them scheduled into a bridge period. it's just like it's really a placeholder. So it's with our college scheduling counselor. So everybody that has all CCP classes, they're scheduled into an attendance period with that counselor.
Yeah.
And when we hear
Yeah,
about
because even
attendance,
though they might be 0%, like somebody
correct.
else had mentioned, it's
Yeah.
you at least need that one period to be attached to a daily so that a P is in there somewhere.
Yeah.
Another thing a lot of schools do, just an FYI with that, guys, is they don't make them 0% because, then they get missed on graduation lists and, things like that, because we tend to say if we don't have a kid 0% of the time, we don't want to include them. So most schools, I think, will at least put 1% so that, it does have something above 0 for those full-time kids. When it goes to ODU, they add those 2% together. So as long as those 2% total, an appropriate amount, if it's 100%, they're attempting 5 credits, it could be 100%. If they're attempting less than that, it has to total less than that. I think the lowest we have is around 5%, which is fine, which is absolutely fine. But again, if the students are attempting at least 5 high school credits, you'll want to make sure that your both time percentages add up to 100%, so you're not losing any funding on those kiddos. So if you are marking 5%, then the CCP sent to would be 95% if they're, again, attempting 5 high school credits.
And I think as attendance laws change and as more and more students, as mentioned, are taking more CCP classes, high school schedules are becoming more and more sort of convoluted. I think we've started to have those conversations one-on-one with districts, and I think it is a lot of times a district by district basis. So we would definitely, I will mention this here in a second, but if you would like a more extensive conversation about that, where we actually sit down and look at your bell schedule and talk through scenarios, of course, put in a ticket with us, and we would like to continue having those conversations to come up with best practices as it relates to students who are not in the building for a full day. We just have a couple more things on our last sort of topic is just, next steps and where to go from here. And then we'll wrap up right about 11 before we offer up any breakout rooms. So again, you can start reviewing your bell schedules now. So bell schedules carry over from year to year. So I know I cautioned you in not making changes to your current bell schedules that are applied to calendar days for this year. But as I showed before in the example, you can go in and create a new bell schedule now. If it's not applied to any calendar days, it's not going to harm anything. And you can kind of see what's working for this year and think about what's going to work best for you next year. Really, more than anything, too, we just want this to be an opportunity and a reminder to look at those bell schedules because of their importance in attendance calculations. And so you can also clean up bell schedules. So again, not deleting anything that we used this year, but if you have a bell schedule, I know we've worked with some districts and they've said, I haven't used this bell schedule in years. It will keep carrying over until it's deleted. So if you delete if you have a bell schedule that you haven't used this year and maybe you haven't used it in years, you can go ahead and deleting that now. Again, as long as it's not assigned and it has no attendance associated with it for this year. You can also do that at the beginning of next year too, but if you do it now, then what you have for 25-26, that cleaned up list will carry over into next year. So that is something that you can start doing now. And then lastly, you can begin creating new bell schedules. So if you are thinking of making changes to your bell schedule for next year, you can go in and as I think there was a question in the chat, and this was a good question, is there a way to duplicate bell schedules? And unfortunately, there's not. So any new bell schedule, as Lindsay mentioned in the chat, would have to be created from scratch. But when I was doing that with my example, I just had, my one bell schedule up on the screen and kind of mirrored it, making the minor changes that I felt like I wanted to make for Meta Middle School next year and named it something different so that I know that that is what I will be using for next year. And then lastly, of course, we are here to support you. We wanted to highlight this specifically today just to get folks thinking about this, get folks aware of those best practices and things to actually look for when reviewing your bell schedules. And we're also going to include reminders going forward. So if you are a district leader, our updated end of year checklist will include the reminder review to review bell schedules. We're going to provide bell schedule reminders at both the end of year and start of year trainings because those adjustments can be made, next year at the before students start. That's a good time to double, triple check to make sure that your bell schedules are as accurate as possible before students start coming in as attendance is taken for the first day of school. And again, if you have any questions, if you are not a district leader, please reach out to your district leader first, your Meta PowerSchool district leader. If they aren't able to help support you or answer your questions, of course, they can join us, or they can put in a ticket to ps.support@metasolutions.net, where we can go over everything there with folks too.